The human ambassador stood silent at the edge of the Grand Assembly Hall, his presence a stark contrast to the room filled with alien diplomats. His sharp, cold eyes scanned the room as the Union of Civilizations celebrated the signing of the treaty, a binding agreement designed to integrate the Terran Empire into the galaxy's political framework. Alien representatives from 100 worlds offered handshakes and nods of approval, but the ambassador remained stoic, his face betraying nothing. Behind their polite smiles and formalities, the alien leaders wore an uneasy tension. The ambassador could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the suspicion. Some wouldn't meet his gaze for more than a moment, while others glared with barely concealed hostility. The Terran Empire was too new, too unpredictable, and, as far as many were concerned, too dangerous. A low chime echoed through the hall, signaling the end of the ceremony. The alien chairman, a rotund figure with quivering blue skin, rose to his feet. "Ambassador, we are honored to have you as part of our union. May this day mark a new era of peace between our civilizations." The chairman's words were rehearsed, his smile thin. Even he seemed relieved when the human gave only a curt nod and stepped away. As the human ambassador walked towards the exit, the conversations of the gathered dignitaries quieted. His boots echoed against the polished floor as he made his way to the docking bay, ignoring the whispers that followed him. The treaty had been signed, but the tension lingered thick in the air like an unspoken threat. He knew this peace would not last. The aliens thought they could bind humanity's strength with bureaucratic agreements and rules of warfare. But they didn't understand. Not yet. Once aboard his ship, the ambassador entered a private chamber, the door hissing shut behind him. In the dim light of the room, he activated a secure communication channel to Earth. The holographic image of the Terran Prime Minister flickered to life. A man of few words, his gaze mirrored the ambassador's cold calculation. "Report," the Prime Minister commanded. "The treaty is signed," the ambassador replied. "But several factions within the Union are already maneuvering against us. The reptilians, in particular, are resentful. They still hold us responsible for the loss of their nursery planets." The Prime Minister's face hardened. "We expected this." The ambassador nodded. "Yes, their hatred runs deep, but it's not just them. I sense mistrust from many of the Union delegates. They fear what we might do. They believe the treaty will contain us, but it's clear that a number of them are plotting to undermine us." There was a pause. "And our preparations?" "Proceeding as planned," the ambassador replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Our sleeper agents are in position across key systems. The military remains on high alert, and the weapons—" He stopped himself, choosing his words carefully. "The weapons are ready, should they be needed." The Prime Minister leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Good. Let them believe the treaty keeps us in check. We'll strike only if necessary. We're not warmongers, but we will not be cornered." The ambassador deactivated the communication link and stood still for a moment, the quiet hum of the ship the only sound. The Union believed that they had tied humanity to their rules, but those rules had never applied when Earth was under threat. He had seen it before, on the battlefields, in the dark voids of space where survival meant everything. Humanity had learned long ago that peace was fragile, and it was only ever secured by force. Exiting the chamber, the ambassador made his way to the bridge. His ship, sleek and dark, prepared to return to Earth sector. The stars stretched out before them, the vast, cold expanse of space, a fitting reflection of the ambassador's own thoughts. He had done his duty, attended their ceremony, signed their papers. Now, it was a waiting game. As the ship slipped into faster-than-light travel, the ambassador's mind wandered briefly to the Union leaders. They believed they had taken the first step toward taming humanity, but they didn't realize the scale of the machine they had just engaged. A machine of fire and steel, one that could burn worlds if provoked. And they had provoked it. The ambassador allowed himself a final thought before turning his attention to the present. There would be no celebration on Earth, no victory parades, only quiet, deliberate preparation. The Union had its treaties and its laws, but humanity had its own way of ensuring peace, a way that was far older and far bloodier than anything the galaxy had ever known. His gaze hardened as the stars streaked past the ship's viewports. They thought they had contained humanity's wrath with a few signatures and handshakes. They were wrong. They'll learn, he muttered under his breath. They always learn. In the shadowed chambers of the Union's capital world, a clandestine meeting took place. The dimly lit room, adorned with ancient stone walls and flickering light, was far from the grandeur of the assembly halls. Here, the true nature of the Union was laid bare. Alien leaders from several factions had gathered in secret, each seated at the long, obsidian table that divided the room. At the head of the table sat Kothrak, the leader of the reptilian Khazar Dominion, his yellow eyes gleaming with barely concealed hatred. "We cannot wait any longer," Kothrak hissed. "The Terrans must be destroyed before they grow any stronger. The treaty means nothing. They're already preparing for war." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The Union representatives from other species, blue-skinned Vakari, stone-faced Krell, and insectoid Thraleth, shared uneasy glances. They had all heard the rumors. Humanity had been too quick to sign the treaty, too willing to cooperate. It reeked of deception. The question was, how much time did they have? An aged Vakari diplomat, Kaler, spoke next. His voice was soft but carried a weight of centuries. "We have seen what they are capable of, Kothrak, but we cannot afford to be rash. The Terrans are a species of contradictions. They speak of peace, yet they burn entire worlds. They demand rules, yet they violate them the moment it suits their needs." Kothrak slammed a clawed hand onto the table, his patience thinning. "Peace is a lie they tell to lull us into complacency. The Terran Empire is not bound by our rules. If we wait, they will turn those same weapons that incinerated our nursery planets on us." Several others nodded grimly. Kothrak's words rang true. They all knew what happened when the humans retaliated for the invasion of their homeworld. An entire generation of Khazar had been wiped out, their future smoldering in the ashes of their ruined planets. "We need proof," Kaler countered. "If we act without it, the rest of the Union will side with the humans, and we will be the ones seen as aggressors." Kothrak's eyes narrowed. "Then we find proof." Weeks later, deep within Terran space, the Union's most elite spies were already hard at work. Posing as merchants, diplomats, and even scholars, they infiltrated human colonies and military bases, intent on uncovering the Empire's secrets. Among them was Zelik, a Thraleth operative known for his cunning and discretion. He had been embedded in one of Earth's outermost colonies, a frozen world called Nereus IV. From his vantage point, Zelik had seen nothing out of the ordinary for weeks, just the daily life of humans expanding their reach in the galaxy. But then, one evening, as he monitored an encrypted human military communication, something caught his attention. It was brief, just a few words exchanged between two high-ranking officers, but it chilled him to his core. "The new weapon is ready. Deploy when the order comes." Zelik's eyes widened. For the first time, he had confirmation. The humans were building something, a weapon that could alter the balance of power in the galaxy. He needed more information. Over the following days, he intercepted further transmissions, slowly piecing together the extent of the Terran Empire's preparations. What he uncovered was far beyond anything he had imagined. The humans weren't just preparing to defend themselves. They were preparing to annihilate any threat that stood against them. Zelik's reports back to the Union were filled with warnings of catastrophic weapons, unimaginable even by Union standards. Stealth fleets capable of erasing entire armadas without warning. Planetary defense systems that could shatter the strongest of Union fleets before they even entered orbit. But it wasn't just the technology that disturbed him. It was the cold, calculated nature of their preparations. The humans had anticipated this conflict from the moment they signed the treaty. He sent his final report with a single message. The Terran Empire is preparing for total war. In the Union's secret council chambers, Kothrak listened to Zelik's findings with grim satisfaction. "It's worse than we thought," he said, turning to the others. If we don't act now, we'll be nothing more than dust beneath their boots." The room was silent, each leader contemplating the horrifying implications. Kaler, ever the cautious diplomat, spoke first. "We cannot allow this to escalate. There must be another way to avoid open conflict." But Kothrak shook his head. "There is no other way. If we wait, we die." Several leaders, swayed by Kothrak's conviction, nodded in agreement. The reptilian leader continued, his voice heavy with finality. "We launch a preemptive strike. Our fleets are already in position. We will hit their colonies first, their outer defenses. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late." Kaler still hesitated. "Are you sure, Kothrak? If this fails, we may doom the entire Union." Kothrak's eyes flashed. "If we do nothing, the Union is doomed anyway. They will never abide by our laws, and their vengeance will know no bounds. We strike first, or we perish." The council room fell into a deep silence, broken only by the approving grunts of those who sided with Kothrak. The decision was made. In the cold void of space, the reptilian fleet prepared to move. Kothrak's heart raced with anticipation. He had set this plan in motion years ago, and now it was time to see it through. The Union believed they could destroy humanity before the Terrans unleashed their full might. As the first ship slipped into warp, Kothrak allowed himself a brief moment of triumph. The humans had underestimated the Union's resolve, but soon they would learn. The Terran Empire was powerful, but they weren't invincible. And when the dust settled, it would be Kothrak and his allies standing over the ruins of their empire. What Kothrak didn't know, however, was that the humans had been expecting this all along. The darkness of space was pierced by the arrival of the Union's preemptive strike fleet. Massive warships bearing the insignia of the Khazar Dominion and its allies materialized in Terran-controlled space, their weapon systems already primed for battle. Kothrak stood on the bridge of his command ship, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation as the human colony of Nereus came into view on the view screen. A small world of frozen oceans and jagged ice peaks. Insignificant, yet the first target in what Kothrak believed would be the unraveling of the Terran Empire. "They won't see it coming," he muttered, his voice filled with cruel satisfaction. His officers, reptilian and cold-blooded like him, mirrored his sentiment, each eager for the coming destruction. But as the Union fleet advanced, something was wrong. The humans hadn't scrambled any defense forces. There were no panic transmissions, no calls for reinforcements. It was as if they were waiting. A deep unease settled in Kothrak's stomach, though he would never admit it. He had expected resistance, chaos even, but there was only silence. And then, without warning, the silence broke. A blinding light erupted from the depths of space as Terran warships decloaked all around the Union fleet. Sleek and black, their angular forms shimmered menacingly against the stars. Kothrak's eyes widened in shock as the realization hit him. They had known. The humans had known the Union would come. They had been waiting for this exact moment. Shields up, all hands to battle stations. Kothrak roared, but it was already too late. The first volley of Terran weapons fire ripped through the Union's ships, shattering their forward ranks in an instant. Precision lasers and kinetic rounds tore through hulls, sending debris and bodies into the void. Kothrak watched in horror as entire battleships disintegrated under the relentless onslaught. "How did they?" An officer shouted, but Kothrak cut him off. "They've outmaneuvered us," Kothrak snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "We need to regroup." But there was no time to regroup. The Terran fleet moved with terrifying coordination, their ships weaving in and out of the Union's disorganized formations, striking with ruthless precision. Kothrak's forces were being overwhelmed, not by numbers, but by the sheer lethality of the human war machines. Across the battlefield, human dreadnoughts loomed like specters of death, their weapons obliterating entire squadrons of Union fighters in the blink of an eye. Kothrak's tactical mind raced, but every countermove he tried to execute was met with devastating human firepower. His fleet was being torn apart, not by chaos, but by the cold, calculated efficiency of the Terran military. It was clear now, this wasn't a defensive reaction. This was a carefully planned extermination. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, Admiral Nathaniel Graves watched the battle unfold with quiet focus. His eyes narrowed as the Union fleet's formations broke apart under his command's relentless assault. The reptilian Kothrak had believed he could take humanity by surprise, but Graves and his officers had been tracking the Union's movements for weeks. "Target their command ship," Graves ordered calmly. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. War had been a part of humanity's history for too long. There was no thrill in it, only necessity. "Send a message to the Khazer Dominion. Let them know we're coming." The weapons officer nodded and relayed the command. A massive pulse cannon fired from the flagship, a blue beam of energy slicing through the void and striking Kothrak's command ship directly. The blast ripped through its shields and hull, leaving it crippled and venting atmosphere. Kothrak barely had time to react as his ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring around him. "Sir, we've lost primary power," an officer shouted, his voice edged with panic. Kothrak gripped the armrest of his command chair, his rage bubbling over into a snarl. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice filled with desperation. "Get us out of here." But the humans had anticipated that too. The Union fleet's escape routes were already blocked by more Terran ships emerging from warp. The trap was fully sprung, and there was no way out. On Earth, the human ambassador stood in the war room, watching the same battle unfold on a vast screen before him. He had been prepared for this day from the moment he left the Union's assembly. As expected, the Union had underestimated humanity's resolve, its ingenuity, and its willingness to defend itself. The ambassador had warned them, "You attacked Earth. We never forget." Now, they were learning what that meant. A communications officer approached him, saluting crisply. "Admiral Graves reports the Union fleet is in full retreat, sir. He's requesting permission to pursue." The ambassador considered this for a moment, his face unreadable. The Union had started this war, but humanity would finish it on its own terms. He turned to the officer, his voice as cold as steel. "Permission granted. Hunt them down." As the Union fleet attempted to flee, humanity's warships gave chase. Union vessels were obliterated one after another, their fragments left drifting through space. Kothrak's command ship, crippled and barely operational, was the last to escape. His pride had been shattered, his once mighty fleet decimated. But as his ship limped away, he knew this was only the beginning. The Terran Empire would come for him, and when they did, there would be no mercy. The humans had proven themselves as more than just an upstart species. They were something far worse, a force of nature unstoppable and merciless. Kothrak had made the mistake of underestimating them, and now his people would pay the price. Back in the war room, the ambassador watched as the final Union ships were destroyed. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Humanity's message was clear. They had been provoked, and they would never forget. Now, the galaxy would face the full wrath of a species that had known war for too long. The ambassador allowed himself a final, cold thought as he left. The Union had wanted to bind humanity to their rules. Now, they would be bound by humanity's.